Good morning, everybody. So I'm Alexander from Belgium, and I may not look like an inventor, but I'm really one. So I've spent half of my career in corporate life, so I know about big corporations, and I spent half of my life in, do I do something wrong already? That's what inventors do. They always do something wrong. You know? Yes. Is this better? Yeah. Wow. Okay. So and I spent the other half of my life doing basically my own stuff, right? So corporations have always difficulty with people that want to do their own stuff. And I was one of those guys, okay, trying to do their own stuff. So this is the story, not so much about my invention, but about how the story shaped my life, or how my life shaped the story. I was born in 1957, so I'm almost 60. I just turned 59, and that was kind of a very hard feeling. I said, oh, almost 60, almost 60. Well, you know what I decided? I said, that day I said, now if the 59 years are gone, it means that I'm already in my 60th year. Just better let get used to it. So that day I turned 59. I said, I'm 60 now. And all at once, the bad feeling was gone. So yeah, I was born in a small village in Belgium, and that small village did look a bit like this. I was the baby, and in that small village, there's basically more cows than people, and it's still like that. So I'm not this fancy guy growing up in a high-tech environment. My parents were very modest people. We weren't poor. We definitely were not rich. Both of them were teachers. This is the school where my mother and my father were teaching. This is the school where I went for the whole of my youth in the 60s. And in Belgium, we have these myths, like there's myths all over the world. We have this myth of, he's called Santa Claus, but he doesn't look really like the Santa Claus you know from Coca-Cola and from the Americans. So our version of Santa Claus definitely is a bit similar. He's definitely a bit different, but he does the same thing, which is he brings toys to the kids. Now, which kid does not want to have toys? I definitely was one of those who adored and loved toys, and one of a game changer in my life happened in 1963. Because Santa Claus came and he brought me this little toy, which was the slot racing track. So I think you have seen these tracks. It was very popular in the 60s and the 70s. You have these little electric cars, two of them, and you have the controller. You could just have the speed going up and down, and then you have to push through the corners and then push your brother, my little brother, out of the corner because he was kind of winning. So it was cheating and racing, a lot of fun. And this, to me, was kind of like, wow. I was 6-year-old, technology, electricity, racing, and immediately I started changing the car. I was changing the tires, I was changing the canopy, I was changing the track. So changing things was kind of like my second nature. And I discovered in 1963, actually, the picture you see is of the real car, because I still have it, thanks to eBay, in my collection of vintage stuff from my youth that I'm got together in the last couple of years. And 2 years later, the same man, Santa Claus, came with this other toy, which was an electric train track. You know, and I'm not sure about Pakistan, but in my age, my generation, those days, everybody almost had this combination of a racetrack and a train, all right? And some others went to piano, and others did something else, but for me, it was the racetrack and the little train. That, too, is something I recollected in the meantime and is standing in my living room. So I became pretty much a technology and toy boy in the literal sense. I don't know about the other meaning. You do. You have to explain me, right? So, and in 1965, I made my first invention. Now, 1965, by the end I was 8, but then I was only 7 or so. In 1965, I built this. Now, this is cheating because I picked out this photo from the internet, but what I invented pretty much looked like this, because I have found a little booklet in the local library about electricity and about electric motors. And I said, I'm going to build my own electric motors. And I challenge you, how many 8-year-old guys, boys do you know that build themselves an electric motor when they are at that age? The answer is very, very few. you know. So that's where my whole spirit became obvious to my parents, who always supported me, because most parents would say, why do you take this car apart? Why do you take this train apart? My parents always say, wow, take it apart, but try to get it back together too, you know. So I got that kind of an education. And then when I grew up, I wanted to become an engineer. Was something that happened overnight, you know. Once I had done this electric motor, my father, who is much more of a philosopher rather than an engineer, I mean, he doesn't know, now he knows because I explained, but he didn't know the difference between a screwdriver and a cow, so he didn't have a clue. Now, he was the one who stimulated me to be different and to stay different. He didn't want to put me, my life on his track. And life goes on, time passes by, and then in 67, 69, we had this big adventure of trying the conquest of space. Now, going to the moon with Kennedy, with his speech, where he arguably, he used it as a political thing, but it ended for me as a kid. It was just fantastic. You had these rockets that go to the moon and then land on the moon. I woke up at around 3 o'clock at night just to see this first step on the moon. It was so inspiring to me. I mean, I can still feel what I felt then. I still feel it today, how it was as a boy to see this Armstrong guy stepping down and say, this is a big step, etc. So I was fascinated by the thing because I had a train, it was fantastic. I had a car, it was fantastic. But flying, that became the real thing. And my parents detected that because, you know, in the same month that this lunar mission landed on the moon, I actually had finished my first balsa wood, so this very light wood that I think you have here too, balsa wood. I had assembled my first little plane. You see there, that's me on the left side with that first little plane. It's a glider with my father, the philosopher, you know, he says, what the fuck is he doing? And then my little brother, who is kind of proud to be there too and support all of my efforts. And that is actually, I mean, sometimes we take pictures and we don't know the meaning in the history of our lives. I mean, that's a historical picture because it's the first flight ever of my first ever small model airplane. And that day, I became this obsessed hobby model freak, nerd, whatever name you want to call it, the kind of people that you say, well, they're a bit lunatic because they spend all of their time and their passion on this. It started all there, and today, that's still what I'm doing. So other people do golf, that's fine. I don't do golf, I do this. I mean, I must have done 20,000 hours, maybe 30,000 hours of my life in building, developing, flying, designing model airplanes and model helicopters. It's just who I am. But then, you get older, you get 18 years old, and you go to this university, the Free University of Brussels. For those who read Latin, it says, Scientia vincere tenebras. It means the science will conquer and win over the darkness. It was a big statement, and I definitely applied the darkness part of it because I became the president of the Students' Club, and you see presidents of Students' Clubs, what they do, they study, and they have lots of fun at night, having parties and all of these things. So I was not really the very best student. That's my point I want to make here. Definitely I had the brains, but I didn't have the passion to spend all my time on just doing the study work, okay? And my career starts. And that went well. I mean, those were the glorifying 90s, 80s, where getting a job, I mean, I graduated, I could choose, basically pick and choose between 15 job opportunities immediately. My career, I started at Motorola. I got on airplanes. I flew business class in the biggest and nicest hotels in the world. I had a technical job, but I liked it. I loved it. They sponsored me. I had studied engineers. I studied engineer at university. And then the company says, well, you pay you an MBA. You do the MBA. That was very expensive. I was very proud, etc. Comes Apple Computer. Apple Computer hired me to become the marketing director for Belgium. And then afterwards, they promoted me to become the marketing director of Europe. I was 30 or 32 years old. I mean, that's kind of impressive, which I thought I was the big man. And just to show off, there's a Porsche there. It's actually not my Porsche, but that was the Porsche I had as a company car. So you have to imagine Apple Computer in the 80s. They hired this young kid from Belgium, and they say, you get a company car. And what is the company car? It's a Porsche 911, all right? I'm not sure it's still the case, but those days, that's how my life looked like, you know? The world was at my feet. I was happy, money, whatever happens. And then, wow, 32 years old, and I got this. I mean, this is basically the metaphor of how I felt. I mean, the more I think about life and myself, the more I get confused. And I really was confused because I was working as this marketing director for Europe, which is a big job, big salary, big whatever. I wasn't happy because Apple was and it still is obviously a great, great company. But the Apple that I had known in the field in Belgium when working with the dealers, but working with the customers, then you move to headquarters, you get into the politics, you get into the power games, you get into just the spreadsheet game, you get into the PowerPoint game, you get into all these things that make the corporate world function, but it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right for me. I said, I don't believe it anymore, you know? And that's where part of me said, I have to give up, I have to do something else, right? At the same time, to be honest, I was in my private life too, I was kind of confused. My marriage didn't work. I was an expat. I didn't spend enough time with the family. So I had a total screw up, basically, of my life. The combination of private and professional just didn't work. And I said, you know, I have to do something. And I decided to basically reboot myself, to resign from Apple, to resign from my wife, and to start a new life with a new perspective. A new life with a new briefing, and we talked, I think the word disruption will probably be used a lot of times, but this was probably in everything that will follow the biggest element of disruption that made it happen. It was a disruption that I committed to myself. Okay, so the disruption in how I wanted to work, what I wanted to be, and how I wanted to live. And I was very conscious, so after I resigned from Apple, I took a 1-year sabbatical. And that was definitely not to go and lay on a beach. That was a sabbatical where I said, I'm an engineer, so I said, you know, if you want to change things, you have to work on things. It doesn't happen by itself, so I have to re-engineer myself. And during that year, I spent a lot of time. I even went to a therapist, not because I was depressed, but just to understand. Just like a car guy works on cars, you have therapists who works on brains and on minds and on souls. So I said, I need a specialist to try to just help me understand, I mean, what I want to be and how I want to be in life. And that became a new way of thinking for me. So where I said, I don't want to be a career guy. I don't care about careers anymore. I just want to be able to be who I am and to be full of the things that I dream of and be able somewhere to express that, but not in a career path, but in projects that I do for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, and then we do something else. So basically like there's the globetrotter, I'm not sure you know this word, but some moving around in life and carry with you the projects that you want to do. A long and a winding road ahead, I was very conscious of that. At the same time, I was still this hobby guy, because again, I said, I worked hard. After a year, I joined another company, and they, not as an employee, but as an independent consultant CEO. In the meantime, after work, I was still doing my hobby. And there was another breakthrough. Okay, there was another disruption, not directly in my field of hobby, a helicopter or airplanes, but the chip technology got shrunken down. So here you have an image around in the 90s, a computer chip typically was something like 5 centimeters long with a lot of legs, and came out this microchip idea. So the original idea of the microprocessor was you had a big microprocessor that could do everything. You know, you put them in computers, in PCs, everywhere, and then you have a lot of power. But some applications don't need a lot of power, computing power. So they say, why don't we make a small chip? And that's the one you see on the right. So a small chip that has a limited functionality with much smaller format. And I saw that, and when I saw that happening, I say, with this, we can do something else. Because my dream was, always been, to have very tiny flying models. You know, airplanes or helicopters. And the reason is, if you're a modeler, half of your time you spend in the rain and the wind and in traffic jams to go to the flying field, which is kind of embarrassing. We always dreamt about being able to fly in the living room. That was my big dream. That was my big passion. And so I started working on that. In my free time at home, you know, during the night, during the weekends, I said, why can't I make these things for myself? Just one, just prototyping. And I decided to install. I bought some stuff and some equipment, very simple tools, and I started working on changing what they call the paradigm for model helicopters from something which was typically then 5 kilograms, running on gasoline, on methanol, very loud, very noisy, very smelly, very oily. You could fly it only outdoor in a big field. So I said, let's take that and shrink it down, just like the chip you saw before, from something big, like 5 kilograms. And my first target was, I want to have it here in my hand. That's what I want to have. And so I started working on that, and what you see there is a very long story because there's maybe 5 years between the first, or 6 or 7 years even, between the left picture and the bottom one. But I shrunk down the technology basically from 5 kilogram in one step. The first step was to 100 grams. So that's divided by 50. So I divided by 50 from 5 kilo metaphor to the 100 gram, and then prototype after prototype, I shrunk it down, and the smallest one I ever made was the bottom one. It almost comes out of a chicken egg. It's 1.7 gram. It's radio controlled. You can fly it not only in your living room, you can fly it in the toilet. I mean, it's so small that it fits everywhere. So that was my thing, and I was, obviously my ego is, I'm not saying it's huge, but it's definitely not small. So in order to have this feedback from people and applause, I put everything on the internet. I was running then an internet company, a service provider. I was making this internet site myself, just to show off to my colleagues who were then much younger and had to have orange hair and piercings. And so I said, I'm already this 40-year-old guy I have to impress. I make this site, I put on my helicopters, and this goes through the world in 1997. So I have to imagine this is almost 20 years ago. You have to imagine how the internet looked like in 1997. So I put this on the internet, and all the nerds in the world who were also on the internet, they contacted me, they congratulated me, which I liked, obviously for my ego, and then I go show off. But the reality is that in a couple of years' time, I got 1.5 million visitors, 1.5 million visitors on my site, and I got more than 10,000 emails, personal emails of people asking questions or just saying, hey, how you doing this, how you've done that. We had a bulletin board where I was posting. So I was growing this community of nerds just like me, that beyond the showing off, we were all friends. I mean, we met on the internet. I didn't know those people, but they sent me emails from all over the world. And that's how we grew the whole idea of this small helicopter. And it became something very, very alive within this small community of nerds. My toolings were very, very sophisticated. So this is my wind tunnel, you know. So the wind tunnel is basically a fan with some cardboard and it was perfectly well and perfectly well enough to do all the developments in aerodynamics that I had to do to come my results, just to show that you don't need a lot to get far. I created two because you have to understand that I told you, I think that at Apple I was this marketing guy. Apple taught me how to do good marketing. So I knew already in 1997 that a good video, I mean, beats anything from pictures, let alone from words, okay? So I created what I call great footage. So all this, you've seen the pictures. I use little animals just to show that this is not just technology. There's a kind of a biological factors playing here. It's touching the nerves of what we do and who we are. And then on the footage, for example, here, I created this. I'm not going to show the video, but the footage here was showing my small helicopter. You see it there. I was sitting in my living room. My foot was naked, you know, no shoes. I had the helicopter there. It took off. It flew around. It was a clip of 10 seconds, and it landed on the living room table. Right? So that clip has been going viral in 97. You have to understand, going viral in 97 was very bizarre. So, and that footage was very, very important to the rest of the story, but we'll come back on that later. And in the meantime, other things happened. I saw that, of course, the 10,000 emails and the 1.5 million people that visited the site, I started to get a reputation, okay? And what you see there is the Microflying Robotics in Space mission. That's actually a white paper from NASA. You know, not just a local small thing, NASA, you know. They wrote a paper about what they thought the future was for conquering space. You remember how I dreamt about the space shuttles and going, so They wrote a memo, an internal document, 20 pages, with the top-notch, state-of-the-art technology of the day and what they expected to be in a later stage. Now, if you look in I have a thing here, here. I mean, this is my name. So in the references, I was quoted here, somewhere, here. I was called Alexander van Rostyne with Pixelito, which was basically the video of the, Pixelito was the name of the little helicopter. So I was referred to as part of the base foundations for new technology for the future of space. You know, another guy there was George Bush. I'm not sure I'm proud about that, but I was there, and my life started to get in a completely different shape, but still not about money. It was not about being successful in this. It was just me and what I was doing and I wanted to do. So I made this small helicopter, which is a step one, which was a form factor from 5 kilograms to, let's say, 20 grams, 10 grams, 100 grams. We could do that. So that I had solved. But the biggest thing I was really trying to get at was making helicopter flying easy. Who has been flying real helicopters here? Nobody. The reason is very simple. It's extremely difficult. So you all know this circus artist who has a ball, and he has to stand on the ball, right? We know that. So what you see, he steps on the ball. If he just stands still, he drops down in half a second. So what he has to do is pedal around on the ball like this, just to stay in equilibrium. You know the little game where you take a stick, you do like this. You know, you take the stick like this, you don't have to do anything. Right? That's what they call stability. You put a stick there, and you like to do like this, then you're juggling around like this, like a Chinese artist, just to get it into shape and into position. So the stick down, that's flying a plane. All right, that's easy. The stick up, that's half of a helicopter, because on a helicopter, you have basically so many different axes that you have to do it with 2 sticks at the same time, just to show you the complexity. So the instability of a helicopter, which is inherent to the design of a helicopter, is universal and has been described in scientific papers since the beginning of helicopters. There was no way you could solve that. I just didn't believe it. I said, well, you know, I read the theories, and I say, I understand what you're saying, but, you know, but there must be a loophole in your theory. I was convinced there was a way of solving that problem. And I said, if we can solve that problem, then my biggest dream becomes reality, which is I want to have my mother fly a helicopter, because then she knows how it feels, what I have been doing all my life. So my mother was my benchmark. She doesn't know anything about technology. She's not a hobby freak, but just my mother, the idea that my mother could fly a helicopter was what was stimulating me. So what I did invent was, after thousands of tests and thousands of failures, because you have to understand, with a flying thing, if you do software development, after 10% of the development, you already know that you're progressing. After 20%, you know you're progressing. After 90%, but because things start working slowly, you add on modules, etc. That's for software, as an example. In helicopter, what I wanted to do, it doesn't work until it works. So all the time you spend in preparing the end result is a sequence of total failures. I spent years, I think 3 years, 4 years, I think my wife can testify, in thousands of tests, all of them failing. Thousands of rotor heads I built, thousands of rotor mechanic systems, thousands of readings that I did just to have to make it work. All of these were failures to then finally have something that worked. So I was able to discover how to do it, and then I say, now we have a plan. And I made this little prototype, which is the second big disruption, or the third. So there was my life, which I disrupted, and then there was the chip technology that was disrupting, and then this was me who built this little prototype. It's a small helicopter, you don't see, this is just a unique thing. It's big like this, and the weight was roughly 10, 11 grams, all right? So that was, and I said, wow, if I can't find somebody to produce this, then really my mother would be twice proud, because first of all, she could fly it, and secondly, I could go to the store and say, look, Mom, this is my box, this is my toy, this is what I did. Still not about the money, right? And so it happened. So this disruption meant that after, I would say, it's since the Big Bang, actually, that we had this theory about helicopters. Obviously, they didn't exist for a long time, but that from the Big Bang till 2005, nobody ever had been able to prove that it could be done. And I was this stupid guy sitting in a little house and just playing around with technology who has kind of solved the problem. So that is basically the disruption that I made there happen. But because I had this job, I was the CEO of this internet company, I definitely didn't want to make money out of it in the sense that I didn't want to have a job in the hobby world. And the reason is then I said, if I do as a job my hobby, then I lose my hobby. And my hobby is so sincere and precious to me that I don't want to lose it in a money debate and in arguments about companies and all of these things. So I said, let's find a partner and create the market, which is what I did. And I teamed up with Silverlit. Now, Silverlit, those days, I'm now talking 2005, was a smaller toy company. I met them in Nuremberg Toy Show. So Nuremberg Toy Show, that's basically the place to be for the toy world. It's kids not allowed, so it's only for business people with suits and everything, with suitcases and a very formal, big business. Every year, 60,000 new toys are presented, and all the big buyers from the big chains, Toys R Us and others, are going there just to place the orders. So I said, well, you know, I go there too, and I walk there with my little prototype and knock on doors. And I met these people at Silverlit, and I said, I didn't know them. Huh? I didn't know them at all. So I see, oh, they have this. Okay, let's just ask. So I went to the front desk, and I said, yes, I'm this person, etc., and I have this prototype. Is there somebody I could talk to? And there was already Chinese. Okay, and then immediately they brought me to a little room on a booth. You see a booth is very beautiful, and then you go to the little room where you have all the coats, and it's not very beautiful. So there was two Chinese sitting there, like this, and they let me in, and I sit down, okay, and I start talking, no reaction. I know, so I'm Alexander, I've done basically what I'm doing here. Okay, 5 minutes like this. And all at once, there was a tall one and a small one. The small one looks at me. You must be Alexander. I said, what are you talking about? Of course I'm Alexander. That's what I told you. No, I see your foot. I see your foot on the internet. He. Okay, so he was this toy guy obsessed with toys because he's running a toy company. It was a family business. His father had founded it. His father had died when he was 20 years old, so he had to take it over from overnight, basically. He was then already 45 or 50 years old, so Kevin. And so that's where I met Kevin, actually, who is the owner of the company, and who had seen my pictures on the internet, and who had said to his COO, so Eddie, who's sitting next to him, well, one day we have to meet this guy. One day we should write him a mail and say if he doesn't want to work with us to become our designer. So then I step in and just say, hello, here I am. So that was the coincidence, and we can talk about what the theory of coincidence or serendipity is there, but that's what's happened. So on the booth, I was already convinced. Now, a lot of companies were convinced because a lot of companies saw the value of what I had invented. But I really was heading for a company that fulfilled on all these requirements. I mean, I needed to have good engineering capacity, good knowledge of microelectronics, so software development, plastics injection, global distribution, and brand building, because I didn't want to do a runoff of one. I said, well, this can be a family thing, a product family, just a new type of products, because remember, since the Big Bang, no helicopters. If definitely all the people here, when you were a kid, nobody here has been flying a small helicopter. Nobody, when you were a kid, you know. Since 2005, about every kid has been flying a micro helicopter and now a drone. So it's become a commonplace now, but that market did not exist. So in order to have a market to exist, I needed to have a partner company that was willing to do the brand, the building, and the awareness in the market to make it a success. Just interesting, because we're talking about corporate life, you see Nico with a cross. So Nico was then and still is a very well-known brand in radio-controlled cars and airplanes. Very well-known brands. Very well established. We're big, kind of the IBM of the toy industry. That same day when I met Silverlit, I went to the booth of Nico, and Nico refused to let me in. Huh, have you been invited? No, I have not been invited. Do you know anybody? No, I don't know anybody. What do you have? Oh, I have a very great helicopter. Oh, our helicopters are better. So these guys turned me down. They turned me down completely. They didn't even let me in, okay, to talk to them. So just to show you how corporate world reacts to change. So basically a couple of weeks later, I decided to really tie up with Silverlit. We made a contract. It's there. The one-pager, the contract between me and Silverlit was one page. And you see, it was not a very heavy page, you know. There was the title and the date, and hello, sir, how are you? Glad to have met. Let's agree to agree. Basically, that's what it says. And just a commission scheme on the royalties. No payment, no nothing, just simple thing. If it works for them, it works for me. If it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for them. That was basically the deal with it. No lawyers, no whatevers, so just a small piece of paper. And we started doing it. 2006, this is basically the helicopter that we brought to the market. So 1 year, took us 1 year to go from the prototype to the final product. And this is the one then that finally lots of kids have had in their hands. We sold in total more than 30 million of these. So 33 million, I think, actually, if the accounts are correct, which made it the biggest selling toy, flying toy in history, right? So we kind of excited about that. And then my mother comes back because we had to launch the product. And to launch the product, because I had done this marketing, of course I was this inventor, but Silverlit says, well, Alexander, could we talk about marketing campaign? And I said, well, you know what I say, so in toys, what's the problem with toys is that what you see typically is a kid playing and say, I'm having fun, and everybody does advertising like that. I think my idea has always been to have my mother being able to fly. So how do we explain that things are easy to fly? I said, just show my mother. A good idea, good idea. So then they said, can you do shooting? Can you do shooting? I said, no, with pictures. Yes, with pictures. And so then I said to my mother, I said, Mom, do you want to be in an advertising campaign? Of course I want to be in an advertising campaign. She was already 75 years old then. And she then even went looking for clothes and glasses that even made her look older. So that's actually really my mother there. That's my mother with our son. And so the image speaks for itself. It's saying, I mean, it's so easy that my grandma is stealing my toys to play with. So there was easy communications. We launched it. Not the shit hit the wall, but let's say everything blew out of the normal proportions. And that was the beginning of this wild ride. And we got Toy of the Year awards in about every country in the world. So there's a couple of them in America, a couple of them again in many, many other countries. This is probably the one I'm most proud about. It's the one I got in Japan. So we didn't get it there. You look at what they say. So your product contributed to the improvement of the quality of life of the people and to the healthy development of our society by your excellent product planning and marketing activity. So for the Japanese, I got an award because I made them more happy. I mean, there's lots of Japanese that are unhappy, so if I can make them very happy, I was very proud about that. Now, why did it work in China? So I come back to my one-pager contract, and I come back to my meeting with Kevin and Eddie in that meeting room, if you can call it a meeting room, in Nuremberg. So why did it work in China? Obviously, yes, because I had made a real breakthrough, a real disruptive innovation. And it could be patented. That was very, very important. So they had a secure feeling about what I had done. So that's step one, why Silverlit wanted to work with me. Secondly, what you see here, the person you see here was the ambassador of China those days in Belgium. And through the university, I had been invited, before I had this deal with Silverlit, for a conference where the ambassador came talking about dealing with China. And her message, or at least the one I remembered, was that if you deal with China, I remember 10 years ago, the Chinese are fed up to being looked at as just cheap labor. And you pay, you know what we said in the Western world, in Europe, you pay them a bowl of rice and you get some cheap products and you sell it, you make margins, etc. That was the story. They say we are fed up in China. In China, we want to see a real partnership based on respect and where we can add value, the value we have brains, we have obviously the manufacturing capacity, but respect was basically the big call she made in this conference. And I hadn't forgotten that. And this is exactly how I approached Silverlit. So now I know for sure that if I had argued to have this 50-page contract, there would not have been this helicopter. And until today, nobody of your kids or grandkids would have been playing these model helicopters, where there wouldn't have been any in the world. So the disruption would have happened, but the next sequel would not have happened. So China and respect and sharing, it meant that my first ever meeting I had in China with the people from Silverlit, I opened up my books. I said, what do you want to know? What do you mean? Yeah, what do you want to know? Oh, we want to know how you, okay, I will teach you. I said, you get all your engineers together and I will give them courses on what is a helicopter, what have I done, how have I done it, etc. Which was for them an eye-opener and very bizarre, because most Europeans, and I guess definitely Americans, would just have said, I'm not going to tell you, here is my patent, do it like this, do it like that. I'm not going to explain one single thing, why it works. You can just copy it, do it cheaply, and then sell it. I said, look, I don't think I'm good enough to give all the answers to the problems you will have in manufacturing, in producing, in distribution, in marketing. Let's team up. I'll open up my brain, you open up your brain, we put the brains together, and we will be stronger. So I've been teaching them, they have been teaching me. We always had open book relationship, and we share our feelings, our disillusions, our hopes, our ambitions. We sit together on tables, we have our eyes glintering about, oh, would we put a red little LED flickering like beep, 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 toot, toot, or should it be a blue one saying beep, ta-ta, boom, ta-ta-ta? I mean, so that is the kind of business development meetings I have in my life compared to the corporate world. It's a slightly different. And here comes back my experience from university. Yes, with them we had these parties, a very warm feeling, a very collegial relationship, and which brings back again the value of having had multiple experiences. So as a conclusion, why did it work for me? Why? Because you have so many people say that, oh, I tried this, it didn't work. Oh, I tried that, didn't work. With the Chinese, oh, that never works because they steal your money, they don't keep their promises, they do all the wrong things, etc. For me, it worked. And I think the list is there. It's a long list. It's whatever you can dream is there. Is the passion, is that, yes, I had this talent, no merit, but I had a talent. But I had the work. I mean, I did 10, 20, 30,000 hours of extra investment in my life, getting better and better and better at it. So I got so good at it that it made something work. The mix of skills. Yes, the corporate world that I turned down after a while in my life, it definitely helped me to get there because I understood how corporations work. I understood how Silverlit works, because then, yes, there was already a company. I mean, they have structure, they have organization, they have constraints, they have financial constraints, they have financial ambitions, they have egos, they have people. So I knew that world, and I could easily add this knowledge to my expertise as a designer. So that helped a lot in how we could work together. So my dedication, the determination, experience, education, the family, the support of Ingrid, well, a small story. You know, I can be extremely focused. Extremely focused. I mean, most people don't understand what I'm saying now. Well, you understand what I'm saying, but you cannot imagine how focused I can be and how concentrated I can be. So if I'm thinking about something, it can be anywhere, and somebody tries to interrupt me in my thinking, I get extremely unpolite. Extremely unpolite. All right? And it's stronger than myself. I just can't help it. And obviously, if in a marriage, I mean, you know, I mean, I'm thinking a lot all the time. So if every time these kind of things it's kind of a problem. I say, look, the metaphor is as this. If you're in a meeting in a corporation, two people, and you talk whatever, could you imagine I come in, I walk in, I open the door and say, do you like potatoes or French fries this evening? You would never allow that to happen. You would say, of course not, you can't do that. And why? I'm in a meeting. That's the argument. I'm in a meeting. This is serious business. So since then, me and Ingrid has this deal that if she just assumes I'm very focused on something, even I'm just sitting in the coach, I can just stare there and sit thinking, then first question she asks, are you in a meeting? And if I say no, no questions asked. She turns around, she goes off, and let me go meeting with myself and do the things I want to do and think about what I do. So that's the value of how we work together and how we got there. So this is basically the story of my life, the life of the story. The story shaped my life shaped the story. I think it's about disruption, it's about ambition and passion, and it's about, on the disruption level, as I said, probably the biggest disruption was not what I did to all these things, but what I did to myself. It was basically when I decided to quit for my standard normal life, take this sabbatical, re-engineer myself, and I think it has been said before, if you really want to change something, start with yourself, because that's the most toughest part to do, and if we all do that, then everything else gets easier. Thank you very much. And then as a final touch, this is a helicopter, right? You see the helicopter, of course it's not a helicopter, it's just a box, a white box, right? But a box opens, right? The box opens, and with a bit of luck and perseverance, comes out this thing. This is not a helicopter. Huh? Then you do like this. Then you do like this. Then you say to the ears like this. Wow. Starts looking like a helicopter, right? Then we put some power on. And we put some power on here. And we have a flying helicopter that my mother could fly, because you see, I don't do anything, you know. Oh. Thank you.